On November 4, 2025, California voters turned out in record numbers, braving long lines and a charged political atmosphere to cast their ballots. The focus of the election was Proposition 50, a measure that had dominated headlines and dinner table conversations for months. When the results came in, it was clear. Voters had delivered a landslide victory for the proposition, which called for a dramatic redrawing of the state's congressional districts. The new boundaries promised to reshape the political landscape, affecting not just local communities, but the entire state's representation in Congress. With nearly 64% support, the measure passed easily, signaling a clear demand for change and a decisive break from the status quo. Jubilant crowds gathered in city centers, waving signs and celebrating what many saw as a new era for California politics. News outlets called the race as soon as polls closed, underscoring the overwhelming mandate. Analysts and commentators quickly weighed in, noting the historic nature of the vote and its potential ripple effects across the nation. Proposition 50 replaced maps drawn by the Independent Redistricting Commission, handing the power back to the Democratic-controlled legislature. This shift marked a significant change in how California's political boundaries would be decided for years to come. Democrats celebrated the move as a long-overdue correction, arguing that the previous system had failed to reflect the will of the people. Party leaders hailed the result as a victory for democracy and fair representation, while Republicans sounded the alarm, warning that the new process would undermine checks and balances and tilt the playing field for years to come. The new maps, crafted in anticipation of the proposition's passage, became law almost overnight. Legislative staff worked late into the night to finalize the details, and by morning, California's political map had been transformed. For Democrats, this was a chance to align California's congressional delegation more closely with the state's political majority, potentially increasing their influence in Washington and shaping national policy for years to come. Republicans, however, saw it as a blatant power grab, arguing that the new districts would all but guarantee Democratic dominance and silence dissenting voices. The swift transition left little time for opponents to react, setting the stage for immediate legal and political battles. Lawsuits were filed within hours, and protests erupted outside government buildings across the state. The stakes were high, not just for California, but for the balance of power in Washington, D.C. With so many congressional seats at play, the outcome could tip the scales in Congress and influence national debates on key issues. The fight over the new map's legitimacy was just beginning, promising months of courtroom drama, political maneuvering, and intense public debate as California, and the nation, watched closely. Proposition 50 was a strategic move by California Democrats, designed to fundamentally reshape the state's political landscape and, by extension, the balance of power in Washington, D.C. This wasn't just another ballot measure, it was a calculated response to years of frustration over how California's voice was represented at the national level. The goal was clear: maximize their representation in Congress and ensure that California's priorities had a louder voice in federal decision-making. For years, Democrats argued that the old, commission-drawn maps left too many seats up for grabs, making it difficult to secure lasting gains. The competitive districts often meant that even in a state as blue as California, Republicans could hold on to more seats than their statewide support might suggest. With Proposition 50, new district lines were engineered to flip up to 5 House seats, from Republican to Democratic control in the 2026 elections, a shift that could have ripple effects far beyond California's borders. In a closely divided House, even a handful of seats can tip the scales, potentially determining which party holds the majority and controls the legislative agenda for the entire country. For Democrats, this was about more than just numbers. It was about ensuring that California's progressive values on issues like climate change, healthcare, and immigration were reflected in national policy. They saw Proposition 50 as a way to align California's influence in Washington with the state's diverse and forward-thinking population. The new lines grouped together Democratic-leaning communities while diluting the power of traditional Republican strongholds. Critics called this classic gerrymandering, arguing it undermined fair representation. Supporters, however, insisted it was a necessary correction to years of underrepresentation. The debate was fierce. Opponents saw Proposition 50 as a blatant power grab, while supporters argued it was long overdue, a way to finally give California voters the influence they deserved. For Democratic leaders and activists, the stakes were high. They believed that with more seats, California could lead the charge on urgent national issues, from environmental protection to expanding access to healthcare and reforming immigration laws. The potential gain of 5 seats wasn't just a statistic. It represented a significant leap in national influence, with the power to shape the direction of Congress for years to come. In the end, Proposition 50 was about more than redrawing lines on a map. It was about reshaping the state's and the country's political future, ensuring that California's voice would be heard loud and clear in the halls of power. Republicans wasted no time challenging Proposition 50. Within hours of the results being announced, party leaders and strategists were already huddling to plan their next move. The sense of urgency was palpable, as they saw the new redistricting maps as a direct threat to their political influence in California. The very next morning, the California GOP, joined by a coalition of conservative activists and local officials, filed a federal lawsuit in a Sacramento courthouse. Their goal was clear: to block the implementation of the new maps before they could take effect in the upcoming election cycle. The legal documents, thick with arguments and evidence, were delivered with a sense of determination. Their legal team, led by prominent conservative attorney Harmeet Dillon, signaled serious intent and national backing. Dillon, known for her high-profile cases and sharp legal mind, addressed the media, emphasizing the stakes not just for California, but for the entire country. The presence of national party representatives underscored the broader implications. The lawsuit demanded an immediate injunction to prevent the new maps from being used in any upcoming elections. The plaintiffs argued that the redistricting process was rushed, lacked transparency, and ultimately violated the U.S. Constitution's guarantee of fair representation. They claimed the new boundaries unfairly diluted the voting power of certain communities. If the court sided with the GOP, California would be forced to revert to its previous district lines, or, alternatively, draw entirely new maps under strict court supervision. This would throw the state's political process into uncertainty, with potential ripple effects for candidates and voters alike. The GOP's ultimate goal was to stop the loss of up to 5 House seats they believed were unfairly targeted by the new maps. They argued that the redistricting amounted to a partisan power grab designed to cement one party's dominance for the next decade. This was a classic move in American politics. When the ballot box fails to deliver, take the fight to the courts. The courthouse became the new battleground, drawing intense media attention and public debate. Republicans argued that the process violated fundamental principles of American law, including equal protection and the right to fair elections. They insisted that the courts had a duty to intervene and restore balance to the system. The legal battle was on, with both sides assembling teams of expert witnesses, constitutional scholars, and political strategists, each prepared for a high-stakes showdown that could set a precedent for redistricting fights nationwide. The outcome of this lawsuit wouldn't just affect California. It had the potential to reshape the political landscape of the entire nation, influencing how districts are drawn and who holds power for years to come. At the heart of the Republican lawsuit is the claim that the new maps are unconstitutional racial gerrymanders. Plaintiffs allege the legislature used race as the predominant factor, violating the Equal Protection Clause and the 15th Amendment. They argue the maps were designed to boost Latino voting power, not to comply with the Voting Rights Act, but to create safe Democratic seats. Republicans say Hispanic voters were already electing their candidates of choice, so race-based redistricting wasn't justified. The lawsuit contends Democrats used race as a pretext for partisan gain, crossing a constitutional line. The court must decide if California's mapmakers prioritized racial data over traditional redistricting principles. The outcome will hinge on how the courts interpret the complex intersection of race, partisanship, and redistricting law. Governor Gavin Newsom framed Proposition 50 as California's answer to Republican gerrymandering in states like Texas. He argued Democrats had to fight fire with fire to protect their interests in Congress. Newsom urged other blue states to adopt aggressive redistricting, making California's move part of a national strategy. This narrative shifted the debate from local politics to a broader battle for fairness in American democracy. For many Democrats, California's new map was not just self-defense, it was a call to arms. California Democrats dismissed the lawsuit as a political stunt, confident their maps would withstand legal scrutiny. They argued the new districts balanced race, communities of interest, and partisan goals within legal limits. Democrats pointed to past legal victories and data showing the number of majority Latino districts hadn't dramatically changed. Their defense: the maps reflect California's true political makeup, not racial engineering. For Democrats, the lawsuit was just another attempt by Republicans to resist the state's changing political reality. They were ready for a legal fight and expected to win. California's legal fight is part of a nationwide redistricting war that's intensified since the 2020 census. Across the country, both parties are using courts to challenge maps they see as unfair. The U.S. Supreme Court is weighing cases that could reshape voting rights law, directly impacting California's battle. In states like Texas and Florida, Republicans have drawn maps criticized as extreme gerrymanders, fueling Democrats' justification for their own aggressive tactics. This tit-for-tat has turned redistricting into a perpetual political arms race. National figures from both parties are now invested in state-level fights, seeing them as crucial to control of Congress. The California case is a microcosm of America's deep polarization over who draws the lines of democracy. The outcome here could set the tone for redistricting battles nationwide. The next step is federal court, where Republicans seek an injunction to block the new maps. If granted, California might revert to old districts or scramble to draw new ones before the 2026 elections. If denied, Democrats gain a major advantage heading into the next cycle. The losing side will almost certainly appeal, possibly all the way to the Supreme Court. The legal process could drag on, creating uncertainty for candidates and voters alike. The Supreme Court's evolving stance on race and redistricting could tip the scales. The fate of California's congressional delegation and the balance of power in Washington hangs in the balance. The courtroom drama is just as critical as the vote itself. California's redistricting battle is a test case for the nation. If the new maps stand, Democrats in other states may follow suit, escalating the partisan map wars. If struck down, it could set limits on using race for partisan gain and revive calls for independent commissions. The case will shape the future of the Voting Rights Act and define minority representation for years. At stake is the core question: who gets to choose whom, voters or politicians? What happens in California will ripple across the country, influencing the rules of American democracy.